Heaven is not silent tonight. The air around you trembles with messages that your spirit has been too weary to hear. You have prayed for signs, begged for clarity, pleaded for understanding, yet the answers have already been sent. You have mistaken silence for absence, when in truth, silence has been heaven's loudest reply. Saint Gabriel Archangel steps forward now, not to bring a new word, but to awaken your heart to what has already been spoken over you. The problem is not that heaven has stopped speaking, it is that your heart has forgotten how to listen. You have been searching for confirmation while ignoring conviction. Every closed door, every unanswered call, every sudden shift that felt like loss was not rejection. It was divine intervention. God has not been punishing you. He has been protecting you. Gabriel stands before you to tell you that the disruption in your plans was a divine interruption, designed to turn you away from what you thought was love, toward what heaven knows is truth. You have been standing at the edge of revelation, yet you've been too focused on the noise of emotion to recognize the whisper of grace. The Archangel's presence is both gentle and undeniable. He speaks not in the language of the world, but in the rhythm of heaven, slow, deliberate, piercing. His words move through you like wind across still water. You have been praying for answers, he says, but your ears have been tuned to what pleases your desire, not what fulfills your purpose. You wanted heaven to agree with your plans, but heaven has been rewriting them. Every delay has been mercy in disguise. Every silence has been divine alignment preparing your heart for truth. God has been trying to reach you through peace, but you keep listening for passion. He has been showing you the difference between a connection that feeds your spirit and one that drains it. Yet your heart, entangled in memory and expectation, has refused to hear. Gabriel declares that heaven cannot compete with the noise you create through fear, anxiety, and attachment. If you would only be still long enough, you would realize that what you call confusion is simply the absence of surrender. The divine interruption is not here to hurt you, it is here to heal you. Heaven interrupts when what you hold on to threatens to pull you out of divine alignment. You may have thought this love was meant to save you, but God is revealing that it was meant to shape you. Some relationships are assignments, not destinations. Some people are meant to teach you faith, not stay to fulfill it. The moment you stop resisting this truth, you will begin to hear heaven again. Gabriel's light now moves closer, touching the center of your being. You can feel it, that pull in your chest, that quiet knowing that something sacred is happening. Listen, he says, for I have come to reveal why heaven's silence was never absence, why unanswered prayers were always protection, and why your heart must now learn to hear what the divine has been saying all along. This is the moment where the noise ends and revelation begins. What you are about to hear is not coincidence, it is conversation. Heaven has chosen this moment to reach you, not because you prayed harder, but because you are finally quiet enough to receive. Archangel Gabriel is speaking to you right now, and this time, heaven will not allow you to miss his voice. The moment God stopped responding. And why? There is a moment in every believer's journey when heaven grows silent, when prayers begin to echo without reply, and faith feels like it is speaking into a closed door. You felt it, didn't you? The stillness after so many cries for clarity, the heaviness that followed every unanswered question about your relationship. It felt as though God had turned his face away from you. Yet what you called abandonment was actually divine restraint. Saint Gabriel Archangel now reveals that heaven's silence was never distance, it was correction. God did not stop responding to hurt you. He went quiet to protect you from what you kept asking for. Heaven knows the danger of giving you what you desire before your heart is ready to handle the truth. There were prayers you spoke through emotion, not wisdom. You asked for signs, but not discernment. You begged for love to return, when heaven was still healing the wounds that made you cling to the wrong version of love. God, in His mercy, allowed silence to replace confirmation, because answering you too soon would have strengthened what was meant to end. The silence was not punishment. It was protection from self-destruction. Gabriel speaks with a voice that carries both tenderness and authority. You mistook quiet for rejection, but it was preservation. Heaven withdrew its voice because your heart was surrounded by noise, the noise of fear, pride, and pain. You could not hear heaven over the sound of your own expectation. The Archangel reveals that every time you prayed and felt nothing, it was not that heaven ignored you. It was that heaven was waiting for your motives to shift. God responds to surrender, not insistence. There was a moment when your prayers became demands, when you asked for God to bless what He was already trying to remove. That was when heaven stopped replying, not out of anger, but out of compassion. For if God had answered then, He would have confirmed your illusion, not your purpose. Gabriel explains that when you love something more than the will of God, heaven must break your rhythm to save your calling. That is why your relationship entered confusion. Heaven interrupted what was built on attachment instead of alignment. The Archangel reminds you that in 1 Samuel chapter 28 verse 6, even King Saul called upon God and received no answer, neither by dream, nor prophet, nor vision, because his heart had turned toward control rather than obedience. In the same way, God allowed silence to teach you that divine communication is not earned through persistence, but through purification. When the heart becomes clean, heaven becomes clear. You have been wondering why peace never stayed, even when love seemed close. Gabriel now unveils the truth. Because you were not listening for peace, you were listening for confirmation of your desire. Heaven never stopped speaking. It only changed the frequency. The voice of God moved from the realm of words into the realm of circumstance. Every delay, every closed door, every unanswered message was heaven's reply saying, "Not this way." God stopped responding because He wanted you to start reflecting. The unanswered prayer forced you to look inward, to ask why you needed that love so desperately, to face the parts of yourself that had mistaken attention for purpose and comfort for covenant. In the quiet, heaven was waiting for your surrender, not your repetition of the same plea. When you finally stopped asking, peace began to whisper. That was the moment heaven spoke again. Gabriel leans closer, his words filled with a deep compassion that softens every wound. God's silence is not the absence of His care. It is the sound of His wisdom rearranging your story. When He stops responding, it is because He is protecting what is sacred inside you from what is temporary outside you. You asked for love, but heaven is giving you clarity, because love without clarity destroys. Now that you understand why heaven went silent, your heart begins to tremble, not with fear, but with revelation. You were never ignored. You were being recalibrated. What felt like an ending was the pause before restoration. Gabriel now invites you to listen more deeply, for heaven has not finished speaking. It has only just begun. When heaven speaks through delay. Delay is one of heaven's most misunderstood languages. The human heart feels it as waiting, but the divine sees it as translation. Every pause, every unanswered message, every season of stillness carries a sentence, heaven is trying to speak. Saint Gabriel Archangel comes forward now to explain that delay is not denial, it is divine conversation. When heaven delays, it is because something in your life, or in the one you love, is still being written. You call it waiting. God calls it preparation. Gabriel shows you that the space between prayer and fulfillment is the place where faith is trained to hear. If every request were answered immediately, you would never learn to distinguish emotion from revelation. The delay in your relationship is not punishment, it is refinement. It is heaven's way of reshaping both hearts until they can hold what they once would have broken. Every delay is a mercy hidden in slow movement. You see, the divine operates in rhythm, not rush. Heaven's pace is perfect, and yet you have been running ahead of it. You have tried to fix what was meant to rest, to force what was meant to form, to hurry what was meant to heal. Gabriel whispers, every time you push against the silence, you delay your own peace. What you call waiting is actually heaven slowing you down so you can catch up with its purpose. You were never behind schedule. You were simply moving faster than divine order. Heaven often allows delay to expose what your faith truly depends on. When time stretches, the impatient heart begins to reveal its fears. Delay unmasks motives. It shows whether you love the promise or the provider. Gabriel says, God delays answers not to torture you, but to test your loyalty, to reveal if you would still believe when the evidence disappears. That is why the clock has been moving slowly, why opportunities seemed to pass, why certain doors stayed closed, not because you were forgotten, but because you were being formed. The Archangel reveals that divine timing does not bend to emotion. God never rushes because you are afraid. He perfects because he is love. In Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3, it is written that the vision awaits its appointed time. Though it lingers, wait for it will surely come and will not delay. Heaven delays only to ensure the foundation is eternal. When love is destined, delay does not destroy it, it purifies it. You have been asking why things are not moving forward, why the one you love seems distant, why reconciliation feels close yet unreachable. Gabriel answers, because God is still working behind the veil of time. You see fragments of delay, but heaven sees the full picture. Two hearts being restored separately, so that when they meet again, they can build in peace instead of chaos. Divine love is not built in haste. It is built in holiness. Gabriel wants you to understand that delay is heaven speaking through silence, saying, wait, not because I am withholding, but because I am perfecting. You have prayed for love that will last, but lasting love cannot grow in impatience. It needs stillness, it needs trust, it needs faith in the unseen. Each day of delay is an angel holding time still until both souls are ready. There were moments when you thought heaven forgot, when you asked if your prayers disappeared into the wind. Yet Gabriel reveals that every sigh has been accounted for. Every tear has been written in heaven's book. Nothing you have endured in waiting has been wasted. God is not delaying because he is silent. He is delaying because he is strategic. The Archangel's presence glows with quiet authority as he says, you are waiting because the story you are living is being written by eternity, not emotion. What takes time on earth takes only one command in heaven. But before heaven speaks that command, every thread of purpose must align. Do not despise the delay. It is proof that the blessing will be lasting. Gabriel's wings unfold as light fills the atmosphere. When heaven speaks through delay, he concludes, the wise do not complain, they listen. For the stillness of time is the language of faith, and those who can hear heaven in the silence are those who will walk in the promise when it comes. Heaven has not stopped moving, it is only moving in secret. What feels slow to you is fast to God, and when the appointed moment arrives, what once felt endless will end in an instant. Your heart is too loud to hear. Saint Gabriel Archangel now steps closer, his presence both weight and peace, his voice carrying the clarity that pierces confusion. You keep saying you cannot hear heaven, he whispers, but the truth is, your heart has been too loud. Your own thoughts have become thunder, drowning out the gentle current of divine direction. Heaven has not gone silent. Your emotions have simply become noise. You have prayed, fasted, and waited, yet your heart has been busy debating what heaven has already answered. Every fear, every memory, every anxious imagining has become its own voice competing with God's. You replay conversations that ended long ago, analyze every word spoken by the one you love, and interpret their absence as rejection instead of redirection. You do not notice that in your overthinking, the voice of peace has been pushed to the background. Gabriel reveals that heaven cannot be heard through chaos. Divine messages travel on still air. Until you quiet your inner storm, heaven's whisper will continue to sound distant. Gabriel's light surrounds your thoughts as he says, "You keep asking God to speak louder, but he is asking you to grow quieter." The volume of your emotions has become the veil that separates you from clarity. Heaven is not in the wind of panic, nor in the earthquake of impatience, nor in the fire of anger. Heaven, as written in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 12, is in the still small voice, and that voice can only be recognized by a heart at rest. You've confused passion with confirmation. You thought the racing of your heart was a sign of destiny when it was often a signal of fear. The divine voice never shouts, it resonates, it does not argue, it affirms. When Gabriel speaks, truth does not panic your spirit, it calms it. The moment peace leaves you, that is the moment you've stopped listening to heaven and started listening to emotion. The Archangel explains that love has been your loudest frequency. You have been trying to hear God while tuning your heart toward a person who cannot yet carry the weight of your prayers. Your attachment has been louder than your faith. Every time you replay what could have been, you amplify the noise that blocks divine wisdom. Gabriel tells you, heaven does not compete with your idols. If your attention is consumed by someone's silence, you will miss God's instruction in your stillness. Heaven has been speaking through rest, through intuition, through subtle signs, but your inner dialogue keeps interpreting peace as boredom. You have mistaken divine quiet for lack of progress. Yet Gabriel insists, peace is not inactivity, it is confirmation. If your spirit is calm, heaven has already spoken. The noise of impatience makes you believe that movement means miracle. But in truth, the greatest miracles are born from moments when heaven instructs you to do nothing but listen. The Archangel continues, when your heart screams, heaven waits. God's voice cannot be forced into chaos. The stillness you avoid is the place where heaven hides its answers. He shows you an image, a lake at dawn, perfectly still, reflecting the light above it. Only when the water is calm can it mirror the sky, Gabriel says. Only when your heart is quiet can it reflect heaven's will. You've been saying, God, speak to me, while drowning in noise you've created, checking signs every hour, reliving words from the past, seeking answers in every small detail instead of resting in faith. Heaven has been saying, be still. The message you need most will arrive not when you search harder, but when you surrender completely. Gabriel reveals that the noise of fear always demands answers, but the peace of faith already knows them. The moment you choose stillness, your ears will open. The person who truly listens to heaven no longer chases voices. They recognize presence. That is what God is teaching you through this season. To trade reaction for revelation, panic for patience, emotion for discernment. Saint Gabriel Archangel concludes this moment with words that resonate like a bell in eternity. Your heart was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a sanctuary. Silence it, and you will hear God again. The moment peace returns, revelation begins. Heaven does not need to speak louder. You only need to quiet your heart long enough to hear what it's been saying all along. The person you prayed for, verses, the person God chose. Saint Gabriel Archangel now brings the revelation that separates desire from destiny. The lesson every soul must learn before love can become holy. You have prayed for someone with sincerity, believing your prayer was aligned with heaven's will. You asked for signs, you begged for confirmation, and perhaps you even saw glimpses that seemed divine. But Gabriel now reveals that what you prayed for and what God chose are not always the same. There is a difference between the love you asked for and the love heaven prepared for you. The person you prayed for may have been real in emotion, but not in purpose. They may have carried affection, attraction, even spiritual likeness, but lacked the foundation needed to walk beside you through destiny. Gabriel speaks softly. God listens to every prayer of love, but he does not always answer it with the person you imagine. When your request comes from longing, heaven hears your pain. When it comes from purpose, heaven responds with fulfillment. Sometimes heaven answers not by giving you what you want, but by removing what could destroy you later. You prayed for this relationship to work, but heaven saw what you could not. The parts of you that would have dimmed your light to keep the connection alive. The person you prayed for might have loved you, yet they were not prepared to lead or protect what God placed within you. So heaven intervened. What you called loss was divine exchange. God took what was temporary to prepare you for what is eternal. Gabriel shows you the truth through a vision. Two paths that once ran side by side, until one began to bend toward purpose, while the other curved toward comfort. When purpose and comfort move in opposite directions, he says, heaven must choose purpose, even when your heart still chooses comfort. That is why some connections that felt destined were never meant to remain. They were allowed to begin only to awaken discernment in you. There is a sacred difference between the person you loved and the one God has appointed. The person you loved awakened your emotions. The person God has chosen will awaken your calling. One reflected what you desired, the other will reflect who you have become. One brought lessons through loss, the other will bring peace through alignment. Gabriel declares, the one heaven chooses will not confuse your soul. They will confirm it. Their presence will sound like peace, not noise. You asked, why would God show me someone and then take them away? Gabriel answers, because sometimes heaven reveals what could be to teach you how to recognize what should be. You were never being teased, you were being trained. God allowed you to experience imitation so you could recognize authenticity. You had to learn the difference between emotional pull and spiritual partnership. The person you prayed for taught you what your heart wanted. The person God is preparing will show you what your soul needs. The Archangel reminds you that in the Garden of Gethsemane, even Jesus prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet surrendered to divine will by saying, not my will, but yours be done. In the same way, your relationship was the cup you wanted, but not the one heaven willed. God's no is not rejection, it is redirection toward protection. If he removed someone, it was not because love failed, but because destiny demanded it. Gabriel's light intensifies as he speaks with holy conviction. You are not losing what was yours. You are being separated from what was temporary. Heaven cannot give you divine fulfillment while your hands are still clinging to emotional comfort. The person you prayed for may one day return transformed, or they may remain part of your past. But the one God chooses will never require you to beg for clarity. They will walk beside you with peace that feels like home. You must trust that heaven's choice always carries a higher understanding. What looks like delay to you is orchestration to God. The one who is meant for you will not arrive through desperation, but through divine alignment. Gabriel whispers, do not chase what God is changing. The one heaven sends will not need convincing. They will recognize you by the same light that has been guiding them all along. The Archangel lifts his hand and a soft light flows around your heart. Let go of the image of the person you prayed for, he says, so heaven can introduce you to the one you were created for. The love you once tried to force will be replaced by the love that fits the shape of your purpose. You are not being denied, you are being redirected. And when you finally meet the person God chose, you will thank him for every unanswered prayer that once broke your heart, because it was in that silence that heaven prepared the miracle. The mistake of praying but not surrendering. Saint Gabriel Archangel now speaks about one of the greatest contradictions in faith, praying while still holding control. You have been asking heaven for guidance, but you have not released the steering wheel. You have prayed for clarity, yet you keep arguing with the answers you receive. You have told God to lead, but only down the path you already prefer. Gabriel says with divine compassion, you have not been waiting for God's voice, you have been waiting for His agreement. And heaven cannot confirm what it did not command. There is a hidden pride in the heart that prays without surrender. You pray to know heaven's will, but your soul already carries a list of conditions. You tell yourself you are listening, yet your heart filters every divine whisper through fear, memory, and desire. You only hear what does not threaten your plan. But God cannot speak clearly to a heart that edits revelation to fit comfort. Gabriel explains that prayer without surrender becomes negotiation, not communion. Heaven is not a marketplace where emotion can buy agreement. It is a sanctuary where obedience receives blessing. When you prayed about this relationship, your words were sincere, but your surrender was partial. You asked God for confirmation, but wanted it delivered in the way that suited your longing. You said, Lord, show me if this is the one. Yet what you meant was, show me that this is the one. You sought heaven's voice, but only if it echoed your own. That is why your peace has been unstable. You were praying for permission to continue, not for revelation to release. Gabriel reveals that surrender is not silence. It is agreement with divine order. It is the act of saying, even if you take it away, I will trust you still. Many people pray, but few truly surrender. The surrendered heart no longer bargains. It stops manipulating outcomes, stops checking for signs to confirm emotion, and begins to pray for strength to follow truth, even when truth hurts. The Archangel reminds you of the words in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Heaven's purpose cannot unfold in a heart that refuses to release control. You have asked for blessings while clutching what blocks them. You have asked for divine peace while protecting your own version of happiness. Gabriel whispers, you cannot receive what heaven holds until you let go of what your fear holds. The mistake of praying without surrender is that it keeps you trapped in cycles of frustration. You keep revisiting the same prayers, asking the same questions, receiving the same silence. Heaven's response has not changed because your posture has not changed. You are not waiting on God. God is waiting on your surrender. Gabriel's light expands as he shows you an image. A person standing before a closed door, knocking, pleading for it to open, unaware that heaven already placed the key in their pocket. That key is surrender. The moment you use it, the door opens, not to what you demanded, but to what you truly need. Every divine door opens inward. You must release before you receive. You cannot hear heaven while clinging to what heaven is trying to heal you from. The Archangel says, some of your unanswered prayers are mercy disguised. God withholds not because he is cruel, but because he refuses to give you what would weaken you. When you surrender, you declare trust. When you insist, you declare fear. Faith is proven not by persistence alone, but by peace in uncertainty. You may be wondering, how do I surrender when my heart still aches? Gabriel answers, by trusting that God's plan includes your healing. Surrender is not a feeling. It is a decision. It is waking up and saying, even if I don't understand, I will obey. It is praying, if this is not your will, take it, even if I cry. Heaven can rebuild what it removes only when your hands stop fighting to hold what is fading. There is no wasted surrender. Every time you release, something sacred takes its place. Strength, clarity, and a deeper awareness of divine presence. The moment you stop pleading for what you think you lost and start thanking heaven for what it protected you from, peace will flood your spirit. Saint Gabriel Archangel concludes this message with a promise. What you surrender in tears will return in light. Nothing released in faith is ever truly gone. It is only transformed. Prayer without surrender keeps you trapped in circles. Prayer with surrender turns those circles into doors. When you stop praying to convince heaven and start praying to cooperate with heaven, divine movement begins again. Heaven is not asking you to stop praying. It is asking you to start letting go. Signs you have been ignoring. Saint Gabriel Archangel now opens before you the scroll of remembrance, moments, dreams, and whispers that you dismissed as coincidence, yet were messages written by heaven. He speaks with the authority of light and tenderness of mercy. You have been asking for signs while walking past them. Heaven has not been silent. You have simply been selective. You have seen what confirmed your desire and ignored what warned your spirit. But heaven never sends confusion. It sends clarity wrapped in repetition. When something keeps appearing, it is not chance, it is divine pursuit. You have noticed patterns, a name that echoes through different conversations, a number that keeps repeating, a dream that revisits you night after night, a moment of sudden stillness that pulls your heart to prayer. Each of these is heaven's way of saying, pay attention. God has been trying to reach you not through thunder, but through threads of light woven into your daily life. Yet you kept brushing them aside because they did not align with the story you wanted. Gabriel says, the signs you ignore become the storms that awaken you. Heaven always speaks first in whispers. Only when ignored does it speak through disruption. There were people sent into your life for brief moments, voices that carried divine instruction, warnings hidden in simple words. Someone advised you to rest, to wait, to trust, yet you dismissed them, believing they didn't understand your situation. But heaven often hides truth in ordinary mouths. Angels speak through strangers, and prophets often wear the faces of those you overlook. You asked for confirmation, and God sent it through gentle correction, but pride or fear made you resist it. Gabriel says, when heaven repeats itself, it is not being unclear, it is being merciful. You have felt that inner tightening in your chest when something felt wrong, that sudden peace when you considered walking away, that strange heaviness before sending a message, and that calm after deciding to pause. Those were not mood swings, they were spiritual signals. The Holy Spirit has been guiding you not through noise but through atmosphere. Heaven speaks most often through feeling, the kind that brings peace, not confusion. Every time your peace left, heaven was saying, not this way. Every time your spirit exhaled, heaven was saying, now you are closer. Gabriel reveals that the reason you missed so many signs is because you expected heaven to speak in ways that pleased your emotions. You looked for the spectacular but ignored the subtle. You expected divine voices in the sky while God was speaking through your restlessness. When the wrong connection entered your life, your peace immediately began to fade. That was your first sign. When you started questioning your worth in someone's presence, that was your second. When you felt closer to God after walking away from them, that was your third. Heaven was not being unclear, your heart was being stubborn. The Archangel now shows you the beauty of divine communication, repetition. Heaven repeats its message until obedience is born. The same verse appearing again, the same advice from different people, the same song playing at the exact moment your faith wavered. All these are patterns of love. God repeats what you refuse to remember. Gabriel says, you will know it is heaven when it arrives through peace and consistency. Confusion does not repeat itself, guidance does. Heaven's signs are gentle, never intrusive. You feel them as subtle interruptions, a delay in your schedule that saves you from an unseen harm, a phone call that redirects your thoughts, a dream that replays a lesson you ignored while awake. These are not random events, they are woven coordination. Every divine sign carries God's fingerprint of timing, The more you quiet your heart, the more clearly you will see how everything was pointing you toward peace all along. Gabriel's light brightens as he declares, "You have not missed God's message. You have only misunderstood his method." The signs were not hidden. They were humble. Heaven speaks in alignment, not in spectacle. If you must chase it, it's not divine. But if it finds you in stillness, it's heaven. You have been looking for fireworks, but heaven's language is firelight, steady, patient, illuminating only what you're ready to see. The Archangel invites you now to recall the most recent sign that brought you peace. It was not dramatic, but it lingered. That lingering was heaven. Every true sign from God leaves residue, peace that stays after the moment has passed. Gabriel says, "Follow the peace, not the pressure. Listen to what calms your soul, not what excites your mind. The right path will never compete for your attention. It will confirm it." Heaven has been trying to speak to you through stillness, through patterns, through dreams, through unexpected voices. It is not that the signs were absent. It is that you were absent when they arrived. But mercy remains. The same signs will appear again until recognition is complete. Because heaven would rather repeat itself 1,000 times than lose you once. Saint Gabriel Archangel concludes this message with a voice that feels like light resting upon your heart. From this moment on, pay attention. What you used to call coincidence will now reveal itself as confirmation. Heaven has never stopped speaking. You have only now begun to listen. The counterfeit connection. Saint Gabriel Archangel now exposes one of the greatest deceptions that delay divine love, the counterfeit connection. He speaks with solemn authority, his tone both warning and mercy. Not every love that feels divine was sent by heaven. Some connections are born of emotion, others of need, and only a few of divine design. The counterfeit appears first because imitation always comes before authenticity. Before heaven reveals what is real, the enemy sends a reflection of it, a near-perfect illusion meant to exhaust your heart before the true blessing arrives. You met someone who mirrored your prayers, spoke your language, and stirred emotions you believed were signs of destiny. Their words echoed your dreams. Their presence felt written in light. Yet Gabriel now reveals, not all that glows is holy fire. Some flames are meant to test how quickly you surrender your discernment in exchange for comfort. The counterfeit comes not to bless you, but to measure you, to reveal whether you will choose excitement over peace, desire over wisdom, attraction over purpose. The Archangel explains that heaven allows counterfeit connections not as punishment, but as preparation. Without the false, you could not recognize the true. God permitted the resemblance so that discernment could mature. He wanted you to learn the difference between energy that flatters and presence that fortifies, between a person who distracts and one who directs. You had to meet the imitation to understand the cost of mistaking chemistry for confirmation. Gabriel says, "The counterfeit makes promises, the divine fulfills them." There were signs all along, the unease that lingered even in joy, the confusion that followed every encounter, the way you began to pray less and worry more. That was heaven's warning. But your heart, eager to believe, mistook intensity for purpose. You told yourself it must be divine because it felt fated, forgetting that not everything intense is eternal. The counterfeit connection often feels urgent because it is sustained by fear of loss, not by peace of presence. Gabriel reminds you that in Matthew chapter 4, verse 8 to 9, even the enemy offered Jesus the kingdoms of the world, promising glory without the cross. So too does the counterfeit offer you affection without accountability, passion without peace, closeness without covenant. It looks like love, but lacks the holy order that sustains it. The counterfeit connection feeds your emotions, but starves your purpose. Its goal is not your union, it is your distraction. Heaven will never send someone who competes with your peace. The one God appoints will not require you to compromise your calling to feel loved. Gabriel says, if their presence demands you to lower your light, they were not sent by heaven. If love costs your peace, it is too expensive for your soul. The divine connection always elevates. The counterfeit always drains. That is how you know the difference. The Archangel shows you a vision, a golden cup and a cup of polished glass. Both reflect the same light, but only one can withstand fire. The counterfeit shatters under testing, Gabriel says. The divine endures purification. That is why heaven allowed pressure. It was not to break you, it was to expose what could not last. True love grows stronger under testing. Imitation collapses under truth. The counterfeit connection often speaks spiritual words, but lives in emotional noise. It will tell you what you want to hear, that you are their destiny, their mirror, their sign, but their fruit will not match their faith. Heaven teaches you to look not at their language, but at their peace. Are they drawing you closer to God or closer to confusion? The difference is everything. Gabriel speaks firmly now. When you cling to what was never divine, heaven must begin to shake it. That shaking is mercy. The distance that followed, the silence that arrived, the sudden collapse you couldn't understand. That was heaven separating illusion from inheritance. You cried over what was never yours because you did not yet recognize how mercy often disguises itself as loss. But the Archangel also brings comfort. Do not curse the counterfeit. Bless it, for it taught you what discernment costs. It awakened your spiritual hearing. It taught you to pray, not just for love, but for truth. The counterfeit was the classroom that prepared you for divine connection. Heaven wastes nothing, not even deception. Now that you see, heaven asks you to release without resentment. You do not need closure from illusion. The lesson itself was the closure. Gabriel's light softens as he speaks the words that release you. The counterfeit can mimic your reflection, but it cannot mirror your purpose. What was false has finished its function. You are free to move toward what is real. Heaven never intended for you to be punished by imitation, only purified through it. And when the true connection arrives, it will not need to convince you. It will simply bring peace so deep that you will finally understand why the false came first. The reason God separated you. St. Gabriel Archangel now unveils one of heaven's most misunderstood mercies, separation. You saw it as rejection, but heaven calls it redirection. You experienced it as loss, but God defines it as protection. Every divine separation feels painful in the beginning because the human heart cannot yet see what the Spirit already knows. Something sacred had to be removed before something holy could begin. Gabriel's voice is steady, carrying both compassion and divine authority. God separated you, he says, not because he wanted to take something away, but because he wanted to give you space to breathe again. There was a time when you confused attachment for destiny. You prayed for peace, yet you clung to what kept your spirit restless. Heaven watched as you poured your strength into holding together what was never meant to remain. You called it love, but heaven saw exhaustion. So in his mercy, God allowed a rupture. It was not the ending of your story, and it was the clearing of your path. The separation was not punishment for loving, it was healing from misalignment. Gabriel says, God had to separate you from what you idolized, so you could remember what you were created for. You see, heaven's mathematics often subtract to multiply. God removes what blocks your peace to make room for what fulfills his purpose. You prayed for a blessing, and he answered with distance. You asked for clarity, and he answered with silence. You wanted connection, but heaven gave you solitude, because sometimes the only way to restore hearing is to remove the noise that keeps you deaf. Separation is heaven's surgery. It cuts to heal, not to harm. Gabriel reminds you that even in Scripture, separation always precedes creation. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 4, God separated light from darkness before he called the day good. The same divine pattern applies to your heart. He had to divide you from confusion before he could call your love holy. The separation was not random, it was rhythmic. Heaven does not break, it prunes. What you thought was falling apart was actually falling into alignment. There were nights you begged for reconciliation, thinking distance meant failure. You asked, why did they leave? Why did this love end when I still felt its pulse? Gabriel answers now, because God saw what you could not. The hidden attachments, the unspoken fears, the dependence that was silently shaping you away from your purpose. Heaven intervened because love that costs your peace is not divine. It is dependency disguised as devotion. God's mercy sometimes sounds like goodbye. The Archangel explains that separation also protects both souls. If God allowed the relationship to continue in its broken form, it would have damaged the purpose of both hearts. So heaven stepped in. The silence, the absence, the sudden ending you could not understand. All of it was heaven drawing boundaries you refused to set. You asked God to save the connection. He saved the person inside it, you. Gabriel's light expands as he says, when God separates, he sanctifies. You were not abandoned, you were set apart. The isolation you feel is the sound of your heart being rewired for divine frequency. Heaven needed your full attention, but it could not reach you through the noise of a relationship that drowned your discernment. Every moment of solitude is a sanctuary where your faith learns to breathe again. You have not been forgotten, you have been reserved. Do not mistake absence for emptiness. The person you love may have been removed from your sight, but they were never removed from God's reach. Heaven sometimes separates two souls not to end their connection, but to heal it in different rooms. Each heart must be restored alone before reunion can be written in truth. Gabriel assures you, what is divine cannot be destroyed. It can only be delayed until both hearts can carry the same peace. The Archangel continues, separation is not the enemy of love. It is the servant of purification. In this space between you and them, heaven is testing motives, healing wounds, and removing illusions. God never subtracts without the intention to multiply. The love that will return after divine separation will not resemble what left. It will come purified, balanced, unafraid. What once hurt you will now hold you. You have been grieving what you lost, unaware that heaven has been celebrating what you survived. The very pain that made you cry out in confusion was the evidence that something divine was being reborn. Gabriel declares, heaven breaks what must not remain so that you can become what must rise. The distance you now feel is the distance between who you were and who you are becoming. One day soon you will look back on this separation and recognize it as the moment heaven intervened. You will thank God for every unanswered call, every silence that forced you to seek peace in prayer, every distance that taught you that true connection begins in spirit, not proximity. What you thought was a closing door was actually the opening of your destiny. Saint Gabriel Archangel concludes this revelation with words that pour like healing over your soul. God separated you because he loves you too much to let you settle. What left your life was never rejection. It was protection. Heaven removed what blocked your purpose so that love, when it returns, will be built not on fear but on faith. Let go of what walked away, and you will see that separation was not the end. It was the beginning of your restoration. How to recognize the true voice of God about love. Saint Gabriel Archangel now moves with deliberate grace, his voice soft, yet carrying the power of truth that silences every doubt. You keep asking how to know if it is God speaking or your own heart echoing, he says. But the answer is simpler than you imagine. The true voice of God never argues. It aligns. It never confuses. It clarifies. It never rushes. It prepares. Heaven's voice always speaks the language of peace, not the peace that comes from emotion, but the kind that remains when emotions have faded. Gabriel explains that there are many voices around you: memory, fear, desire, loneliness, guilt, and each one tries to sound divine. But heaven's voice carries a distinct frequency that can only be recognized by a still and surrendered heart. The divine does not shout over chaos. It waits until you quiet down to listen. When God speaks about love, his message never manipulates your emotions. It awakens your discernment. His words will not stir anxiety. They will bring alignment. The more you seek confirmation through fear, the harder it becomes to hear the truth through faith. You have confused intensity with instruction. You felt something powerful and assumed it was divine, forgetting that not everything that shakes you comes from heaven. The true voice of God will never feed obsession, never pressure urgency, never contradict peace. Gabriel says, if the voice you hear pushes you to rush, prove, or chase, it is not God. It is your fear wearing his tone. Divine instruction never demands panic. It invites patience. When God speaks, his words come with an invisible assurance that even in waiting, you are safe. The Archangel reminds you of John chapter 10, verse 27, where it is written, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." To recognize God's voice is not about hearing new messages. It is about remembering his tone. The divine voice sounds like home. It does not flatter, it fathers. It corrects, but it does not condemn. It instructs, but it never insults. When you feel convicted but not crushed, that is heaven. When you feel pressured, anxious, or confused, that is the echo of your own will, resisting what God is trying to teach. There were moments when you thought God was silent, but he was actually speaking through discomfort. The unease you felt before taking a step forward was his voice saying, "Not yet." The sudden peace after releasing someone was his whisper saying, "Now you're free." You expected the voice of God to arrive as thunder, but it came as transition. People leaving, doors closing, timing shifting. Heaven's voice often speaks through movement, not volume. Gabriel reveals that God's voice about love is always consistent with his character. He will never tell you to compromise your faith for connection. He will never instruct you to chase someone who is running from his presence. He will never encourage a relationship that breaks your peace or distracts you from purpose. If it costs your intimacy with God, Gabriel says, then it cannot be from God. The divine voice always draws you closer to truth, even when it requires you to walk away from comfort. To recognize heaven's voice, test it by its fruit. The right message will not just feel good, it will produce good. The voice of God leads you into forgiveness, not bitterness, into calm, not chaos, into patience, not panic. The voice of God confirms while deception confuses. When you feel that inner release, that sudden knowing that does not need proof, that is the divine signature. You will feel light return to your body, tears rise from relief, and an unexplainable peace resting over what once felt impossible. Gabriel explains that the enemy's voice always demands proof, but heaven's voice gives peace before evidence. You will know it is God when you stop searching for confirmation, because peace itself becomes the answer. That is how heaven speaks, not with pressure, but with presence. The voice of God, Gabriel says, does not compete for your attention. It commands it through calm. Heaven's guidance also requires obedience. Many stop hearing because they stop obeying. The divine does not repeat instructions to those who ignore the first word. If you want heaven to speak again, return to what God last told you and obey it. The sound of divine silence is often the echo of disobedience waiting for repentance. Once your heart realigns, the frequency clears, and heaven's voice returns like a river, steady, undeniable, full of light. Gabriel concludes with words that strike deep into the soul. You will never miss God's voice when your heart is more committed to truth than to outcome. When you are willing to lose what you want to keep what is holy, heaven's tone becomes unmistakable. Love from God will always carry His peace. Follow the voice that leads you there, and you will never walk in confusion again. The true voice of God does not merely inform you, it transforms you. And when you finally hear it, you will stop asking for signs because peace will be enough proof that heaven has spoken. When God silences a person to heal them, St. Gabriel Archangel now reveals a truth that few understand until pain teaches it. Sometimes when a person disappears, heaven is not punishing you. Heaven is protecting them. God silences people when their spirit needs to be repaired. He removes their voice not out of cruelty, but because their words would carry wounds that have not yet been healed. Gabriel says with quiet authority, "You have mistaken absence for abandonment, but it is often divine anesthesia, heaven putting the heart to rest so it can be restored. You have asked, why did they leave so suddenly? Why did they stop reaching out when everything felt aligned?" The Archangel answers, "Because they were bleeding internally in ways you could not see. God withdrew them before their brokenness could break you. What you perceived as rejection was intervention. Heaven saw the unspoken fears, the old wounds, the unresolved trauma they were carrying into the connection. Before they could become the person who loves rightly, they first needed to become the person who lives righteously." Gabriel explains that divine silence is heaven's form of intensive care. When God silences a person, He is not ignoring them. He is isolating them. He takes them into solitude to perform healing that no human relationship can achieve. If they stayed connected to you while broken, their pain would spill into your peace. So heaven separates not out of punishment, but preservation. The distance protects both souls, theirs from distraction and yours from damage. There were moments you felt confusion, wondering how someone could vanish without explanation, how love could freeze overnight. Yet Gabriel reminds you, when heaven silences someone, it also silences your ability to understand why. That confusion was divine protection. It stopped you from chasing what was being transformed. God needed you to release what He was repairing. He needed you to trust that even though you could no longer hear them, He could. The Archangel paints the image clearly. A sculptor cannot reshape clay that is being touched by other hands. So too, God cannot reform a heart that is still being molded by human expectation. Heaven silences to reshape. The absence that torments you is the sound of healing happening in secret. One day that person may speak again, but their voice will carry peace instead of pain. Gabriel draws your attention to the life of Saul, who became Paul. For 3 days, God silenced his vision and voice so that transformation could begin. In Acts chapter 9, verse 9, it says that Saul neither ate nor drank for 3 days. The silence of heaven upon him until he was ready to receive new sight. So it is with those heaven removes from your path for a season. The silence is sacred. It is the tomb where the old self dies and the new creation rises. You may not understand why you had to lose communication with someone who meant so much, but Gabriel says, if God silenced them, it was because He is teaching them to hear His voice before they can speak to yours again. Until they learn heaven's tone, they cannot honor yours. Until they learn obedience, they cannot understand covenant. The silence is their sanctuary of correction. Heaven is teaching them lessons you could never teach through conversation. And what of you? Gabriel reveals that your own healing was hidden inside their silence. The distance gave you room to rediscover yourself beyond the role of Savior. You wanted to fix what only God could repair. Their absence forced you to find peace that did not depend on human presence. The same silence that healed them restored you. Heaven always heals both sides of a broken prayer. The Archangel speaks gently now, his voice like a wind settling after storm. Do not chase what God has called into solitude. If you reopen what heaven is still operating on, you will interrupt the miracle. The waiting is not a void, it is incubation. Every day that passes in silence is another day heaven works behind the veil of time. The one who was silenced will speak again, but when they do, their words will no longer wound. Their tone will no longer tremble with confusion. They will carry peace because they will have met the healer. Gabriel assures you that divine silence is never permanent. When the lesson completes, heaven reopens communication. But if God has closed the door and sealed it with silence, it is because both hearts are being rewritten in private. What you see as distance, heaven calls destiny in process. Let God finish his work, Gabriel says. Do not try to reopen what grace is still repairing. When God silences a person, he is rewriting their story without your interference. And when they return, if they return, it will not be as the person who left. They will come back whole. The love that once needed healing will now be capable of offering it. The same silence that separated you will become the bridge that reconnects you under heaven's timing. St. Gabriel Archangel ends this revelation with a truth that quiets the soul. You may not hear their voice, but heaven does. You may not see their growth, but heaven does. Trust that every silence filled with prayer becomes a conversation between God and the soul you love. Wait without fear, and let the divine silence finish its healing. What heaven is saying about your next step. St. Gabriel Archangel now stands before you, radiant with calm authority, his wings half folded as though holding space for revelation. You have prayed long enough, he says, asking if you should stay still or move forward, hold on or let go. Heaven has heard your indecision and speaks now with clarity. It is time to walk by faith, not by fear. Your next step is not about chasing what left. It is about aligning with what remains. You are standing at the threshold of divine transition, where hesitation becomes the final test before breakthrough. Heaven has been preparing you in silence so that your next move is not born from emotion, but from discernment. Gabriel explains that every divine step begins in peace. If the thought of acting brings panic, it is not the time. If stillness brings calm, then stillness is obedience. Heaven's guidance never rushes, it positions. For months, perhaps even years, your prayers have circled the same questions. Should I reach out? Should I wait? Should I give up? And heaven kept answering with the same command, be still. But now that stillness is beginning to shift. You can feel it. The atmosphere around your life changing, the weight that once held you starting to lift. That is how heaven signals movement. Gabriel says, when peace begins to rise again, it is the Spirit announcing that the time for waiting is ending. God is saying to you now, move, but not backward. Do not chase old patterns disguised as second chances. Move forward, into healing, into purpose, into alignment with truth. Heaven is not asking you to restart the same story. It is inviting you to write a new one, led by wisdom, not nostalgia. The next step is not about who returns to your life, but about who you become while waiting for heaven's timing. Gabriel shows you an image, a traveler at dawn standing on a mountain trail. Behind them lies a path of stones they once tripped over. Ahead lies a new road covered in golden light. You cannot walk both paths, he says. To step forward, you must release what your heart still revisits in memory. Your healing cannot share space with your history. Heaven cannot open a door for your future while your hand still knocks on the past. Heaven's instruction is not vague. God is calling you to rebuild, to return to prayer, not for answers, but for intimacy, to renew the spiritual disciplines you neglected while trying to hold together what was fading, to pour into purpose, into service. into the callings you abandoned when heartbreak consumed your focus. Your next step, Gabriel says, is to restore your altar. When your worship returns, your clarity will follow. When you fix your gaze on divine purpose, love will find you where you are meant to be, not where you were left. The Archangel reminds you that God's direction often comes disguised as divine unrest. That tug in your spirit, that sudden desire for change, that pull toward new beginnings, those are not random impulses. They are heaven stirring your destiny. Gabriel says, the Spirit is moving you from waiting to walking, from longing to listening, from heartbreak to healing. Heaven does not guide through guilt. It guides through grace. When the step is right, peace will walk beside it. But Gabriel also cautions, do not run ahead of revelation. God gives you enough light for the next step, not the whole path. If you try to see too far, you will walk by anxiety instead of trust. Faith is not seeing, it is stepping when peace tells you to. Heaven reveals direction in fragments to teach dependence. The path of destiny unfolds one obedient step at a time. You may fear making a mistake, but Gabriel assures you, you cannot ruin what you surrender. Even if your steps are hesitant, heaven will correct your course. Obedience always outruns error. God is not waiting for perfection. He is waiting for permission, the permission you give when you choose trust over fear. Heaven is saying that your next step is sacred because it carries the weight of transformation. You are walking out of confusion into clarity, out of longing into fulfillment. Do not return to what cost you your peace. Do not try to reopen what heaven has sealed. Step forward into purpose, and everything meant for you will begin to follow. Gabriel concludes with a truth that fills the air like morning light. Your next step is not toward someone else. It is toward yourself, the version of you heaven designed before heartbreak rewrote your rhythm. Step back into alignment with peace, and divine love will recognize you again. Heaven is not behind you, it is ahead. Move toward the light, and the rest will meet you there. This is the moment where waiting becomes walking. Heaven is not silent anymore. It is guiding step by step, breath by breath, into everything that was promised. The message that will not wait any longer. St. Gabriel Archangel stands before you now with the urgency of heaven in his voice. The light around him shifts, brighter, closer, as if heaven itself refuses to delay another second. This message, he says, cannot wait any longer. For too long you have been circling the same questions, asking for confirmation while heaven has already given answers. The signs have spoken, the peace has departed, the doors have closed, and still you linger in hesitation. Heaven will no longer repeat what it has already revealed. This is the hour to act, to listen, to release, to obey. Gabriel's eyes seem to pierce through the veil of your uncertainty as he speaks. You have prayed for clarity, but what you truly seek is permission. You want heaven to bless what your spirit already knows must be left behind. That is why peace has become elusive, why every attempt to rebuild what was broken keeps collapsing. Heaven cannot strengthen what it has not sanctioned. This message comes not to comfort your delay, but to end it. God is saying, choose obedience over attachment, faith over fear, purpose over nostalgia. Heaven has been patient with your indecision, because mercy always waits, but even mercy has movement. The time has come to leave behind what no longer carries divine presence. The people who walked away were not rejecting you. They were responding to heaven's call to step aside so your path could open. The silence you keep trying to interpret is not confusion, it is closure. Gabriel says, stop trying to revive what heaven has released. Every time you return to what God has ended, you reopen the wound he already healed. You have mistaken delay for devotion, thinking that waiting for what hurts you proves faithfulness. But Gabriel declares, Faithfulness to pain is not faith. It is fear disguised as loyalty. Heaven is not asking you to prove your love through suffering. It is calling you to demonstrate trust through surrender. This is the moment to decide whether you will keep reliving the same heartbreak or walk into the restoration waiting beyond it. Gabriel explains that the reason this message cannot wait is because hesitation has become your hidden chain. Each time you doubt what heaven already confirmed, you strengthen the prison around your destiny. Divine timing is moving forward, with or without your cooperation. The seasons are shifting, and heaven is offering one more chance to align your heart with its rhythm. If you continue to delay obedience, the opportunity will pass. Not because God is cruel, but because his plans cannot stay still for human indecision. The Archangel's voice grows steady, almost commanding. Heaven is saying, stop asking what you already know. Stop clinging to the voice that went silent when peace left. Stop confusing memories with prophecy. The person you keep holding on to was a chapter, not your conclusion. You are not losing them. You are losing the illusion that they were your destination. The true blessing begins the moment you release what was never meant to be eternal. God's instruction has already been written in your spirit. You feel it every time your heart resists returning to old patterns, every time a new vision flickers in your dreams, every time you sense the call to step into purpose. That pull is heaven reminding you that you were not born to live in repetition. Gabriel says, the message that will not wait is this: the season of waiting is over. The time for obedience has come. Heaven is not waiting for your understanding. It is waiting for your surrender. You do not need every answer to begin walking. Revelation unfolds through movement. As you take the step, light will follow. The road that looks dark now will glow beneath your obedience. Gabriel reminds you that faith is not knowing, it is trusting. When Abraham obeyed, he says, he did not see the destination, but heaven saw his faith and called him blessed. So it will be with you. If you continue asking for another sign, heaven will send silence instead. Because this is the final call before breakthrough. A command to stop questioning and start walking. The very thing you fear to lose is what is holding you back from everything you were promised. Gabriel's wings unfurl, filling the space around you with divine wind. Heaven has already spoken, he says. Your delay does not change the decree. Obedience is the bridge between confusion and clarity. This message cannot wait because your destiny is at the door. The blessings you have prayed for are ready to pour, but they cannot enter the house where disobedience still resides. Gabriel concludes, do not wait for another confirmation. You are the confirmation. Heaven has chosen this moment to call you forward. Move and you will see why everything had to unfold the way it did. The sound of his voice fades into the quiet rhythm of your own heartbeat, steady, certain, echoing one truth. Heaven has spoken. The time is now. The restoration that begins when you listen. St. Gabriel Archangel now brings the message to completion, not an ending but the turning of a sacred page. His voice no longer carries urgency but peace, the kind of peace that only comes when heaven's words have taken root in the soul. Now, he says, the time for running, for searching, for resisting has ended. The restoration begins when you finally listen. Listening is more than hearing. It is alignment. It is the moment when the soul stops arguing with heaven and begins to flow with divine order. When you truly listen, your heart opens, your spirit quiets, and your life becomes an instrument through which God can play his melody again. Gabriel explains that heaven restores not by replacing what you lost, but by repairing what you became. The healing starts inside, in the silence where obedience meets revelation. You have spent so long chasing signs that you forgot that listening is itself a sign, proof that your faith has matured beyond desperation. Now that you've stopped demanding and started discerning, heaven can rebuild what confusion once destroyed. Gabriel says, "Every moment you spend in stillness becomes a seed of restoration. You do not need to force the miracle. You only need to make room for it." The act of listening invites heaven to move again. The restoration will not always appear as you expect. Sometimes it will come quietly. The return of your peace after a storm of overthinking, the feeling of freedom when you finally stop waiting for a message that will never come, the calm realization that your worth was never tied to who stayed or left. Gabriel reveals that restoration begins when you stop looking for external signs and start hearing the internal whisper of grace. You are loved. You are seen. You are safe. Heaven restores through revelation. The more you listen, the more you see how every closed door was a divine edit, how every silence shaped your discernment, how every delay matured your faith. You begin to understand that you were never being punished. You were being prepared. Gabriel says, when you listen, you begin to interpret your pain as prophecy. What once hurt now teaches. What once confused now confirms. Listening transforms suffering into strength. The Archangel's wings spread wide as he continues. Heaven restores through new beginnings disguised as peace. There will be a morning when you wake up and realize that the ache you once carried is gone. You will breathe differently, lighter, freer, as though a weight has finally lifted. That is the sound of restoration, quiet, steady, holy. You may not notice the exact moment it begins, but you will know it has arrived when you stop asking why and start thanking God for what was learned. The person you once begged heaven to return may come back, but if they do, it will not be to repeat what was broken. It will be to fulfill what was rewritten. If they do not return, the restoration will still find you, because heaven never ties your healing to human action. Restoration is not a reunion, it is resurrection, the revival of joy, purpose, and trust that were buried under disappointment. Gabriel whispers, "The restoration that begins when you listen is not about who comes back, it is about who rises." When you truly hear heaven, everything in your life begins to realign. Opportunities reopen, peace returns. The same silence that once frightened you becomes your sanctuary. What once felt like waiting becomes worship. Heaven begins to rebuild, not from where things broke, but from where you began to believe again. The light that was hidden returns, stronger and steadier. You will start to notice divine timing everywhere, in conversations, in peace, in moments that feel too purposeful to be random. That is how heaven speaks to the listener, through alignment. Gabriel reminds you that restoration is not rushed, it is rhythmic. It unfolds according to heaven's order, not your impatience. Each day you remain still in faith, something invisible heals. Restoration, he says, is the reward of surrender. You were never waiting for love to find you. Love was waiting for you to listen. The Archangel's final words are soft, yet filled with the power of completion. Your listening has opened heaven's gate. What was delayed is now being delivered. What was broken is now being rebuilt. What was hidden is now being revealed. Heaven restores through peace, and peace has returned to you. From this moment on, you will no longer mistake silence for distance. You will recognize it as the sound of God rebuilding your life. He raises his hand, and light covers you like dawn breaking after a long night. Listen, Gabriel whispers, and live. The restoration has begun. Heaven has spoken, and this time you heard it.